Very well, guys. So let's continue with the next section here. I called this video secondary forms because we're still working on some of the elements here on the handle. But we're going to be like exploring certain things. I always want to make sure that I show you guys new techniques and new tips and tricks. So for instance, if we go to this little arrow over here, we can change the matte cap. By default, we have this gray color, but there's other options that are actually quite nice. For instance, I personally like this sort of like brown color. It has a little bit more glossiness and it allows me to understand the form a little bit better. However, for this particular one, it might not be a bad idea to use, for instance, this dark one, which like looks a little bit closer to what we would expect from the stone, right? So I'm gonna go to my draw sharp, and first I wanna like find where this next stone is. But I'm gonna start actually from the bottom. So you can see the bottom rock right here. It's very, very thin. So we're gonna start right around there. Let's make the brush way, way smaller. There we go. So that's gonna be like the base that connects to the metal bit. And then after that, we got this stone right here, which also follows this sort of like upwards direction, right around there. And then we got this it's a very weird stone because we got this sort of like curved stone going up. So it's gonna curve upwards as we go to this area right here. And then like halfway through, we get this sort of like cut where we got this like extra shelf on this stone. And this whole section right here, as you can see, kind of like follows in this direction. And we need to remove all of this volume right here. So the quick draw or the draw sharp is a very, very cool button to, or brush to use to get a general idea of the sketching of our element. Now I'm gonna start using my clay buildup or my clay brush to remove some of the elements. Now, one thing that you might be able to see here is that there's a little bit of an error. And I think this is a driver issue that I have. And it usually happens when I open Photoshop. So I was using Photoshop to show you guys something. And as you can see, it no longer detects the pen pressure. So it's going straight to the maximum amount of pressure. So let me solve it real quick. Give me just one second. There we go. So in order to solve it, I had to close Photoshop and reopen the Blender. But just it's a quick fix. Just make sure you always have your pressure set on, because otherwise it becomes very, very difficult to work with this sort of things. So I'm gonna start like carving out again a little bit more volume from this rock right here to generate that very, very intense. You can see it right here. It's a very, very intense flat surface on this area. And then right around here at this corner, this one is definitely like way, way more inside of the object. So I'm gonna start removing more volume here. Another quick way in which we can do this, by the way, is with the grab brush. So if I grab the grab brush, press F again to make this bigger, and I just start pushing this in a little bit more, I'm gonna be able to differentiate, I think that's the word, differentiate the different parts nicely. So let's go back to clay strips, go here. And this one, where this thing ends, this one has a little bit of a shelf. So I'm gonna add a little bit more volume there. And then it goes up towards that area. Let's grab our draw sharp again. Let's make it smaller with F. And we're gonna carve in this section. Now, whenever I'm sculpting rocks, one of the cool things that I find about rocks is that they are very forgivable, or I'm not sure if that's the right word. You have a lot of flexibility with them, meaning that if you make small little mistakes here and there, it's really not that big of a deal, because rocks are very organic, right? They're very random. So unless you're doing a very specific rock, like, I don't know, like the Lion King's rock or something, you can get away with having a little bit of a mistake here and there. So it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as it reads as a rock, then you are in a good position. Hey, what's up, guys? Sorry about that. Let's go now with the scrape brush, and we're just gonna like sharpen this borders a little bit more there. There we go. Let me grab my draw sharp. Just carve in there a little bit more. So that's that thing that I just did there. It's this little like hangout that we got there. I'm gonna use the draw sharp in the inverse to create like a sharper border. There we go. And then even that sharper border, I feel like it's a little bit too much, so I'm gonna use again my scrape brush to just like trim dynamic it a little bit. That's another thing about the game assets. You usually don't want to have like 90-degree angles. They are complicated to work with. They're not, again, the end of the world. Like, it's not gonna happen, like nothing's gonna happen if you use 90-degree angles. But especially on the baking department, we're gonna talk about baking later on when we go into texturing. On the baking department, if you have a lot of like 90-degree angles, it can get a little bit tricky to make sure that the bakes come out as clean as possible. So here we have another rock that I'm gonna kind of like separate. So it's gonna be another like plane right there. And I'm gonna use again my scrape brush to start flattening this. So this is now the last rock that we have right there. So there we go. There we go. Let's use clay strips. Just start again carving in. Rock sculpting is a very cathartic thing for me, I would say, because again, it's just you, the brushes, the sculpt, and some good music on the background, and it's a good time. I don't do a lot of environment art, to be honest, but I know that environment guys do a lot of rock sculpting. So if you want to pursue an environment sort of career, make sure to practice your rock sculpting because you're gonna be doing a lot of rocks. There's a lot of like scans nowadays, like 3D scans and mega scans and things like that, and they're great, right? Like especially for like big things or big mountains or parts of a video game or a film where the specific rock is not as important. Those assets are really really good, but every now and then you're gonna have a special set or a special place on your game or on your production, and you are gonna need to sculpt a very specific rock, and this is where all of this knowledge can really come into play. So again, just a mix of draw brush, clay strips, and flatten brush and scrape brush. Both of them are really good, by the way. You can switch between them. I personally prefer the scrape brush because it reminds me a little bit more of the trim dynamic from ZBrush. There we go. Let's do a Control R to recalculate everything here. Let me go to Draw Sharp again. Let's like really divide this. And I understand what the artist was going for when she was doing this specific like piece. I know lava tends to flow and it kind of like solidifies in this case in this sort of like rocky elements, right? So that's kind of what we're doing here. Let's use the scrape again. There we go. Let's do just a little bit of clay strips here. Cool. Now, I think we're in a really good position. As you can see, the handle is looking quite nice there. We're capturing most of the elements. I do feel like, for instance, this rock right here needs to be a little bit flatter. So I'm going to go with my scrape brush. And I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive here on the flat side of things. So we get a more aggressive, sort of like a rock effect or rock look. And there we go. The next stage for this particular weapon is going to be to add a little bit of texture, right? So rock texture that allows us to use all of these primary and secondary forms that we just created, and it elevates those forms into something even better. Again, using the analogy of the, of the cake, it's like if we just finished baking an amazing and super delicious bread, and now we're gonna go with the toppings, right? So if we have a very nice frosting, we're gonna make sure to have an excellent cake at the end of the process. Well, the same thing happens with sculpting. If you have a really good base mesh here on the element, then once we sculpt once we add the details that are gonna be the last part of the process, then all of the things are just gonna fall together. Now, one of the things I want to do is I kind of want to go to the center line right here and just, again, because I know it's going to be a very symmetrical thing, but I don't want to be like super symmetrical. So especially on the back, I kind of want to sharpen things a little bit more there. Same thing here, like for instance, this one right here. Let's make it a little bit of a sharper rock. Because otherwise it looks like just like a blob. Here, again, the grab brush is an excellent brush to deal with this sort of things. So big changes in the silhouette because they will change the general shape. In this case, it's giving us a sort of like angulated effect, but it's not going to be super bad. Now, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to remesh. I'm going to change this to 0.001. So this is 3 times as many elements as. And when we remesh, we're going to go from 200,000 to 2 million polygons. And it's very important that we make this jump. I know it might seem a little bit scary, but it's very important that we do this jump because otherwise we're not going to be able to add all of the tertiary details that we're still missing. So one of the details that I'm going to start doing here is I'm going to start pushing some of this clay a little bit more aggressively so that we can really give the impression of separating this thing from the other rocks. So don't be afraid of increasing the polygon. As you can see, this is 2 million points. It might seem like a lot, but Blender can handle it. If you're having issues with your computer, then I suggest keeping the number a little bit lower, but try to increase it a little bit in certain areas or in certain pieces, especially for instance the volcano that we're going to be doing a little bit later, so that we can utilize all of this specific details. So yeah, that's it for this video, guys. I'm gonna stop it right here, and on the next one we're gonna be going over the tertiary details. So hang on tight, and I'll see you back on the next video.